August 9th, 1969, film star Sharon Tate and 4 other people, 1 woman and 3 men, are found slain, their bodies scattered around a Benedict Canyon estate in Los Angeles, in what police said resembled a ritualistic mass murder. On the front door of the home, written in blood, is 1 word: pig. America and the world are in shock. Who could have committed such a horrific crime? Why Sharon Tate? Sharon Tate, the all-American poster girl, emerging young actress and wife of famous director Roman Polanski. In death, she would ironically become the Hollywood icon she aspired to be in a real-life murder mystery. A murder mystery that placed this icon of innocence on a collision course that would intersect with a total psychopath who became a criminal legend and an icon of evil. Sharon Tate, 26 years old and 8 months pregnant with a baby boy, is buried on August 13th, 1969 at Holy Cross Cemetery in Los Angeles. What forces played out in the days and months preceding Sharon's murder? To understand the terrible events that happened that night in Los Angeles, we must go back in time. March 1967. Playboy magazine declares this is the year that Sharon Tate happens. Quite an accomplishment for the daughter of an American military officer born into the middle class. Just 24, with 4 major films completed, Sharon is poised on the edge of stardom. She had already gained attention in Jacqueline Suzanne's bestseller, The Valley of the Dolls.
All I know how to do is take off my clothes.
In 1969, she stars in a comedy, The Wrecking Crew, showing her range as an actress.
Little talk now?
Nicholas Gessner directs Sharon in her final film, 13 Chairs.
Une merveilleuse course au trésor qui révèle l'extraordinaire talent comique de Sharon Tate. Le dernier film de cette ravissante vedette. Le point culminant de sa carrière cinématographique.
Oh, non, posez-moi tout de suite!
I'm a big fan of her still after 40 years. But I think objectively, yes, she had this very rare quality, you know, and as François Truffaut would have said, the camera loved her. She was an up-and-coming name, but I'm convinced with her talents, she would have been a really big, big star.
Sharon was nominated for an Academy Award on the film Valley of the Dolls for Best Supporting Actress. She didn't win, but she was nominated, which was impressive for a newcomer.
Springtime 1967. At the same time that Sharon Tate is building her career, a nobody called Charles Manson is released from prison. Son of a prostitute, he grew up with no family on the marginal edges of society. At 32, he has already spent over half his life in jail. A dangerous pseudo-mystic, he is fascinated by Scientology. Using the hippie movement, he starts assembling a family of hippies, dropouts and drug users in the Haight-Ashbury section of San Francisco, where the hippie culture started. Its philosophy is based on peace, love, and happiness. The original hippies espouse altruistic utopian goals. They challenge authority. Their ethos is fueled by drugs, sex without guilt, and a perpetual party. The young women and men who flock to Manson fall under his spell, almost as if they are brainwashed.
Manson's special talent was he could spot somebody who needed a father figure. So he would weed and choose and pick, and he found the most vulnerable, the most waif-like, and then used LSD and some type of weird brainwashing technology to get them to believe that he was everything he said he was, which was sometimes Jesus Christ, sometimes Satan, sometimes both rolled into one. But they believed every word he said, and they would do whatever he asked them to do.
Well, when I first met him, the man talked to me, and he says, why don't you come up, and the rules are that, there is no rules. You just look at it and just be beautiful with it, and it's just beautiful to you. Yeah. And I love him.
Mm-hmm. His so-called power, which it only lies in his happiness. Yeah. That's what attracts people, is he's completely happy.
Warm.
He dances. Generally, he dances, he sings, he looks beautiful, he looks happy. And this draws a lot of people, just like people are drawn to little babies.
So many young people seemed lost. The hope and promise of the early 1960s had already been shattered by the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. Terrifying events play out in rapid fire on the world stage in a decade when times and attitudes are undergoing profound changes. Changes that would evolve from the generation of love to a radicalization of ideals that erupt in violence never seen before in the United States. From the assassinations of Malcolm X in 1965 to that of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King in 1968. Nightly newscasts are punctuated with images of the Vietnam War escalating out of control. The barbarians are at the gate.
To make this year the decisive one.
It is a moment when the Viet Cong, the VC, Victor Charlie, the code name given them by the U.S. Army, symbolize the enemy abroad, a killing machine creating bloodbaths of young soldiers. A moment when another Charlie, Charles Manson, will create his own bloodbath on American soil, provoking the stuff of a nation's nightmare. In another world, thousands of miles away, Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski are married in London at a civil ceremony, followed by a reception at the posh Playboy Club. Deborah Tate, Sharon's sister, gives a rare television interview. At the time of Sharon's wedding, she was only 15 years old. She recalls how Sharon's marriage to the Polish director gave her sister entree into the inner circle of hot, edgy glitterati.
They fell in love very, very quickly. It was a deep mutual admiration. You also have to realize that both Sharon and Roman at that time were living an absolutely blessed life. They moved in the best and the most posh circles in both continents. It was magical.
You were arrested here for wearing bikini.
How do you
feel about doing nude scenes in a film?
Well, I feel that if it's a real scene and it's an honest scene, and if it's something where you're stripped naked, that you would be doing naturally, making love, which is natural, taking a bath, that's lovely,
While Sharon Tate is living a glamorous lifestyle, Charles Manson is trying to break into that world as a rock star. A thwarted ambition that will eventually be part of his motive for the murders. Manson wants a recording contract. He hounds people in the music business, especially someone named Terry Melcher. Melcher lives with starlet Candice Bergen at 10,050 Cielo Drive. It is at this LA mansion that Charles Manson and his followers enjoy many parties. It is an address that they know well.
They actually would socialize with Manson and the girls. Terry was enjoying this very often, the drugs and the sexual favors that were offered quite regularly as one of the benefits that went with Charlie.
December 1968. Terry Melcher and Candice Bergen move out of the house. A few days later, after they leave, Tex Watson, a member of the Manson family, goes to the house several times to visit a friend who has been given permission by Terry Melcher to stay there while it is empty.
Tex Watson went there in the month of January after Terry had moved out and before the Polanskis moved in when Dean Morehouse lived in the house. He was the father of one of the Manson girls.
February 1969. The house vacated. Sharon finally convinces Roman to move into her dream house. The couple has just learned that they're having a baby.
It had a city view of lights. It was so romantic. Sharon said, I must have this house. This is my dream house. Roman and I will be so happy here. Rudy Altabella, the owner, had not accepted the offer they made. He came back with a full price. Roman agreed to pay it, and Rudy said, Elaine, I'm not going to lease it to them. I said, why? He said, I have a feeling. I have a bad feeling about it. It took me weeks to convince him. There was no reason not to want them. Anyone else would have just taken it like that. But he had a suspicion.
March 23rd, a few months before the murder, one of the oddest twists of fate happens. Roman Polanski has just left for London. Renowned international photographer Hatami, a friend of Sharon's, is with her. He tells us for the first time what happened that day.
That day I was filming Sharon. I was always there. Then I saw somebody entering in the property, to the Sharon's villa. I said, who are you? What are you doing here? He said a name which wasn't familiar to me. And then Sharon came in the same time out of the villa. I said, who is it, Hatami?
For an instant, Sharon and the stranger make eye contact. Then the man leaves. It would later be revealed that the man was Charles Manson. Manson came to the house at 10,050 Silo Drive looking for producer Terry Melcher with his obsession, getting a recording contract. The next day, Sharon Tate travels to London to join Polanski, who is preparing for his next film. Later, she travels to Italy to work on the movie 13 Chairs.
She was pregnant. Roman and myself told her, you go to a Swiss clinic, for movie stars like Sophia Loren, and you have your baby. Meanwhile, I cut the movie, and then you come back and we do the revoicing. She wouldn't hear of it. She wanted to go home. But in fact, if she had listened to Roman and to myself, she would still be alive, you could say, but that's a lot of ifs.
Even with these ifs, Sharon decides to return to Los Angeles. She says goodbye to Roman. On July 20th, Sharon Tate arrives back in LA. Her family is there to welcome her home.
She was very pregnant by that time, and she came out onto the front porch wearing a little Poochie dress, which was a designer of that time, and it was very bold, bright colors with a lot of movement. She looked so radiant and so gorgeous. And I ran up the front pathway and gave her a big squeeze and dropped down and coochie-cooed the big belly sticking out. It was a moment of peace and contentment.
At that family reunion, the Tates watch history being made. Just like families all over the world, they gather around the television and watch Neil Armstrong make a small step for mankind and a big step for humanity. It is July 20th. In less than 3 weeks, Sharon Tate will also make history. History that is void of humanity.
We jumped in that big old bed. Sharon was up at the top. I was beside her, and then as my mother and my little sister came in, I scooted myself down to lie across the bottom of the bed because it was just too many bodies in there. That was the last time I saw her. That was the last time I saw her that I can recall.
While the Tate family are celebrating, Charles Manson and his so-called family are living an entirely different kind of life. A life where they would be pushed on a downward spiral out of control. Details will emerge over the years about wild sex parties orchestrated by Manson. He uses a combination of sex and drugs as dual weapons to recruit and then control his band of followers at a makeshift commune spawn ranch, a spot near Hollywood that was once used as a location to film westerns.
They would sit around in this one building that existed at that time that was referred to as a saloon, which was a big open area, and they would sit in a circle and start taking tablets of LSD, which was the drug of choice in 1969. And they would just continually take LSD until they passed out. The last person to remain still upright was more or less the winner, I guess you could call them.
Many of the young girls become dependent on drugs and are totally under Manson's control. They will do anything he wants.
They were the sex objects that Charlie recruited guys to come up to the ranch. So Charlie wouldn't really have been much without his girls around him. So they were very important to him, but he used them up real fast.
July 23rd. Temperatures are soaring. Sharon spends time awaiting the birth of her baby, surrounded by friends and family, especially her younger sister, Deborah.
I brought her a large tractor tire inner tube, and that was her most prized possession in those last few weeks, was that tire so she could float weightless in the swimming pool and be comfortable with that big old belly.
Sharon seems to be relishing her pregnancy, but Hatami says that she confided some secrets that were upsetting her.
Sharon told me that Roman didn't care to father that child. When she told him that she's expecting his child, he wasn't happy at all. He contested that situation. He said that he doesn't care to be a father. And that's how I understood he left California and went back to London, because I thought he didn't care to have that sexual fantasy with the pregnant woman.
I was never, the 100% faithful, and I intended to be. I knew myself, and I knew that the marriage is not going to change me. But I loved her, and I think she loved me the same way, and it was the greatest period in my life. It was in the midst of those 60s, and it was all I always wanted.
While intimate details about Sharon Tate and her marriage to Roman Polanski have emerged, so have dark secrets about Charles Manson and his disciples at his sanctuary, Spawn Ranch.
He started training them to kill. He actually had martial arts lessons. He taught them how to hold knives, how to stab people, how to throw knives. It was like a paramilitary camp, yeah. And he was training guerrillas who were going to go out there and do his bidding. And why they allowed themselves to become murderers? Well, part of that is he taught them that to kill someone is the greatest act of love you can ever perform for another person, because you're allowing that person's soul to be released from their body, which he convinced them was a prison, that everybody wanted to be released into this other world, and they bought it.
Manson carefully trains his followers as part of a grand design to provoke a race war. The idea came to him after listening to the song Helter Skelter on the recently released White Album by the Beatles. In Manson's sick mind, he thinks the Beatles are the prophets of the apocalypse.
Helter Skelter, that's the name that the family gave to the revolution. It talked about people who were at the bottom of the slide getting back to the top. Well, Manson thought that the blacks were at the bottom of the slide of society, and now they were going to get back to the top. They wanted to kill a lot of people and have those murders blamed on blacks so that the whites would retaliate and start killing blacks, and it would create a big race war.
He demanded their loyalty, and when they gave it to him, he demanded the next step. Well, sure, you love me, but do you love me enough to father my children? Yes. Do you love me enough to sleep with those guys over there? Yes. Do you love me enough to kill? And eventually, the answer was yes.
July 25th, 2 weeks before the murders. The Manson family are already burglarizing homes, and on this day step up the ante by committing murder. A musician friend of theirs named Gary Hinman recently came into an inheritance. Manson wants the money.
Manson sent Bobby Bousselet, one of his followers, and two of the girls to Hinman's house to get the money. They tied him up, searched the house, couldn't find any money, and then started torturing him.
At the Tate Polanski home, preparations for the new baby are in high gear. As she is renting the house, Sharon telephones realtor Elaine Young asking for permission to paint the baby's nursery.
The last days, all Sharon could talk about was her baby. And she called me, wanted me to come up to the house and see the room and find out how she could furnish it and what kind of baby things to do. She wanted to paint the room. She wanted to know what colors she could use.
August 5th, Manson family member Bobby Bousselet is arrested driving musician Gary Hinman's stolen car en route to San Francisco and booked for his murder. Manson learns of his arrest the next day when he returns to Spahn Ranch after a road trip to Big Sur, a beautiful area of the rugged California coastline.
When he came back from that trip, that's when he told the family that now was the time for Helter Skelter, because he'd been very disillusioned because the blacks didn't start the revolution the way he thought they were going to.
Helter Skelter, Manson's personal race war, is to become one of the motives for the murders. But another important motive is Charles Manson's anger at the establishment in general and the music world and Terry Melcher in particular. Manson still doesn't have his recording deal and thinks Melcher is ignoring and disrespecting him. The more Manson sees, the more he pushes his followers over the edge into a murderous rage. August 8th, daybreak. Another steamy midsummer dawn as the sun rises over Sharon Tate's home on Cielo Drive. Sheila Wells, a close friend, calls Sharon to cancel a lunch date for that afternoon.
Well, I was unable to go that day because I was having a gathering at my house that night. And so, and I was expecting Sharon to come to that. And at that point, she was. She called me back and she said, I feel so awful. And it was really hot. She was very pregnant. And that was the last time I spoke with her.
If Sharon had gone to Sheila's party, she might have avoided death. But Sharon's fatigue allowed her younger sister Deborah to escape her fate.
That evening, I was supposed to go up to Sharon's home to pick up a custom saddle that she had ordered for me. I gave her the courtesy phone call, and she declined because she was hot and tired and sticky and didn't feel like putting on proper attire or makeup or, being the good hostess that she always liked to be for people.
8:30 p.m. Sharon and 3 friends go to dinner at their favorite Mexican restaurant, El Coyote. Jay Sebring, an ex-boyfriend who is a famous hairdresser to the stars, and friends of Roman's who have been staying at the house for a few months, Abigail Folger and Wojciech Frykowski.
I said, hello, how are you today? And she says, fine, thank you. She was always so kind and sweet, you know. And I said, I'm sorry I didn't have a big table for you. And she said, that's okay, Estela, we're close to you anyway. You know that I always like to sit with you.
10 p.m. The foursome arrive back home at Silo Drive and prepare for bed. 11:30 p.m. A car pulls into the driveway driven by a young man, Steve Parent. He is visiting Tate's caretaker, Bill Garrettson, who lives in a cottage behind the house. 12:30 a.m., August 9th. The killers arrive.
They knew that Candace and Terry were no longer living there, but they didn't care because people like them were living there. That was Sharon and Roman. In their mind, they were young, they were wealthy, they were in the industry. They were very jealous of the young, wealthy movers and shakers in the industry.
They knew the layout of the house, and that's why on the night of the Tate murders, when they left Spahn Ranch, Manson told the group that was leaving, and it was Linda Kasabian driving, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Tex Watson. He said to the girls, he said, do what Tex says because he knows the layout.
Those people had swam in that swimming pool. They had sat on the same couches. They had eaten off the silverware, knew where the cupboards were with the glasses in them that they would drink out of, the towels that they would wipe themselves off with later on. They knew the layout of the home in every aspect.
The first thing Tex Watson does when they arrive at the house is cut the phone wires at the front gate, and then the group enters the property. 12:45 a.m. 4 figures clad in dark clothes make their way up the driveway and approach a car driven by Steve Parent, who is on his way home. Watson shoots him 4 times as the young man begs for his life. Then the killers enter the house.
And then Watson went in, opened the front door for Atkins and Krenwinkel, and then went over to the sofa in the living room, and Wojciech Frykowski was asleep on the sofa. And Watson woke him up and told Frykowski that he, Watson, was the devil there to do the devil's work. The 2 girls went back to look to see if other people were in the house. They walked past Abigail Folger's room, and she was in bed reading a novel. And Sharon was in bed, and on the foot of her bed, Jay Sebring was sitting, and they were talking, and the girls both were armed with knives, and they got both of them to come out to the living room, and then on the way out to the living room, they picked up Abigail Folger and had her come out.
Jay Sebring resists. They shoot and stab him. Wojciech Frykowski runs out of the house onto the grass, where he too is stabbed and shot. Abigail Folger also tries to escape and is chased by the killers, who catch up with her on the front lawn and stab her to death.
Sharon Tate was in the living room on the sofa, and she was begging and pleading for her life. She knew what was happening to the others. I'm sure she was in a state of shock, but she told Susan Atkins, please don't kill me, please don't kill me. I want to live, I want to have my baby, please don't kill me. And Susan Atkins looked at her, and we know this from Susan Atkins, who testified in front of the grand jury. She looked at her and said, and I'm using her words, look, bitch, I don't care about you, I don't care about your baby. you're gonna die, and you better get ready.
I have got a really bad feeling. I need to talk to my sister, but the phone is busy. It's not like us to hang on telephones very long. We state our business and get off the phone. I started getting a very panicked feeling, and I was pacing back and forth in the house, going to the phone every few minutes. And the phone, I would dial Sharon's number over and over and over again, and it was busy, 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 busy.
August 9th, 2 a.m. Back at Spawn Ranch, Charles Manson and his young female disciples are dancing in the moonlight when the killers return. Tex Watson boasts, everyone there is dead. 8 a.m., Cielo Drive. The maid, Winifred Chapman, arrives for work and discovers the carnage. She would have been one of the victims had she not refused Sharon's repeated invitation to stay the night.
Well, at the Tate house, the maid, Winifred Chapman, found the bodies and didn't find all of them, but saw enough so that she ran down the driveway screaming and ran to a neighbor's house, and the neighbor called the police, and that's when the police came and discovered the scene of horror.
One of the first police officers on the scene has never spoken publicly about what he saw when he answered that call. Tom Weisenhunt breaks his silence.
I was on the south side of the division. Saturday morning, it was pretty quiet. Streets were fairly clear at that hour. Everybody was still at home sleeping from, the night before. So I really didn't expect that Saturday was going to be one of those days, other than taking a few reports and maybe answering a few calls and watching the traffic. But I had no idea that it was going to turn into the day that it did. Well, it was approximately 9:05, something like that, a.m., and I heard a call come out on the radio. I stopped at the location and I saw Jerry DeRosa in uniform standing outside. He says, "I think we have some dead bodies inside." And I said, "Well, let's go take a look."
They didn't know whether the killer was still there, and so they had to be very careful every time they went around a corner to make sure that somebody wasn't going to start shooting them or stab them. And they had seen death before, but they had never seen anything like this. I don't know that any police officer had.
We walked in and walked up to a Rambler that was parked sideways, and I looked inside the window and I saw a body inside, obviously deceased. And I looked at Jerry and I said, let's go, we'll go check the house now. So we drew our service revolvers. We could see the door was partly open. There was some writing on the front of the door, later determined it spelled pig. There was blood. We could see the bodies on the front lawn. And there was an open window. It was about halfway open. And I pushed the window open further and I stepped in and immediately detected the odor of fresh paint. And when I got around the side of the couch, then I saw two additional bodies. Obviously, both of these people were dead. One was a female. She had blood all over her and also had that kind of varnished mannequin look. It was unrealistic when you looked at it. It did not look like a human.
After searching and securing the main house, the police officers follow a trail of blood leading to the pool. From here, they spot the caretaker's house. As they approach, they see Bill Garrettson inside. Thinking this may be a suspect, they come closer with guns drawn.
I couldn't see what he was holding. Couldn't see if he was armed. And he spun around right in front of me, between myself and the window and the glass, maybe 5 feet. And we came eyeball to eyeball. And I looked in his eyes, and there was nobody home. He was not there. His eyes were just totally glazed over, and he was just staring.
Police arrest Bill Garretson and walk him to a waiting police car, using the lower path away from the house without passing by the bodies. The posh neighborhood of Silo Drive is soon swarming with police. Crime scene photographers arrive, as do the press in droves. 5 savage murders, and the facts are slim. Initially, police charge the only surviving person at the estate, Bill Garretson.
The boy's completely innocent. The police simply have the wrong man. He's not involved. He knows nothing about the case, and I expect I'm going to win an early release for him.
While police investigate the crime, the victims' families are coping with the tragic news.
My mother had a friend over for a moment. A lady came in with a little coffee cake, and they sat down to chit-chat, and I took the opportunity to take a break and go get in the shower because it was ungodly hot. And all of a sudden, the shower door flies open, and there's my mother being supported by this little tiny 80-pound, 82-pound woman. And I'm in the shower with soap on my hair, and I look at them like, what's the matter with you? Are you crazy? Kind of a look on my face. And I noted that my mother was void of life. And she said, Wayne called. Wayne was my boyfriend at the time. Wayne called and said that there's a fire and Sharon's dead. I got a detective on the phone that felt comfortable enough sharing with me what had actually transpired. And he said that it was a brutal murder. And he verified the address with me on the phone. So I knew indeed it was Sharon's house. And he verified the number. And I knew indeed that Sharon was amongst those dead. And then I sank. But I still had the duty of getting Roman and my father on the phone. My mother completely fell apart. I never cried. I didn't have time. I had too much to do.
At Spawn Ranch, Charles Manson's bloodthirsty vision of Helter Skelter is far from sated. He orders his killing machine to prepare for another night of terror. At the same time, in the middle of the night in London, Roman Polanski is told by his agent that his wife and baby are dead.
He cried with such pain, worse than the pain I saw in my mother, worse than the pain I saw in my father. Because with this news, he recalled all of the horror that he had seen with the Nazi occupation of Poland, where his mother's life was taken in front of him. Same with his sister. You have never seen. That was the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life. Something so strong, so smart, with such a lust for life, have the life drained right out of him.
The murders were terrible. These were people that were stabbed to death, they were hacked to death, there was things written in blood on the walls, but the people that seemed to fear the most was the Hollywood community. They thought someone was targeting celebrities, someone was out to get them.
August 10th, Roman Polanski flies back to Los Angeles. This tragic news is just the beginning. There will be other unexpected challenges. This shocking story is far from over for Roman and Sharon's family. Nor is the story over for the police who are mounting their investigation, or for the people of Los Angeles. Manson's reign of terror would take a bloody turn that same day. Charles Manson randomly selects the home of middle-aged couple Lino and Rosemary LaBianca in the fashionable neighborhood of Los Feliz. Just like the Tate murders the night before, the killers leave their signature, the words, "Death to Pigs" and "Helter Skelter." written in the victim's blood.
People were scared, very scared. And they had a right to be. They had a right to be. You had people out there murdering, killing, slaughtering, butchering for no apparent reason. And two nights in a row.
The Tate-LaBianca murders, as they came to be known, dominate the headlines. Coverage borders on a media circus that reaches a crescendo when Roman Polanski arrives in Los Angeles. The first victims, his friends, murdered at his home.
As far as LAPD was concerned, they thought that it was probably a drug ripoff, because Frykowski was known to be into drugs. Both Frykowski and Folger had methamphetamine in their blood when it was analyzed afterwards.
Just days after the murders, Sharon Tate becomes a bigger star in death than in life. The showbiz vultures, eager to cash in on her newfound celebrity, re-release in movie theaters Valley of the Dolls and Fearless Vampire Killers. And this time, her name is before the title.
Sharon Tate.
This is the ultimate irony of the sordid Hollywood machine. Los Angeles police released their prime suspect, the caretaker, Bill Garretson. The pressure to make another arrest is intense to calm the jittery, near-paranoid community. The next day, Sharon Tate and her baby, Paul Richard Polanski, are buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Los Angeles. August 16th. A few days after the victims are buried and 1 week into the investigation, 75 officers from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department raid Spahn Ranch. They are acting on a tip about a group run by Charles Manson, who is operating a stolen car ring. Manson and 26 of his followers are jailed and released for lack of evidence. With the heat ratcheted up, Manson abandons Spahn Ranch and moves the entire family to Barker Ranch in Death Valley, far from Los Angeles and from the police. An almost inaccessible hideaway that can only be approached by driving through a treacherous canyon entrance on a dirt road littered with rocks. August 19th, Roman Polanski holds a news conference at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. He is forced to defend himself and Sharon from baseless allegations. It is almost as if he has to apologize for the lifestyle at their Cielo Drive home, a lifestyle that the media suggests is the catalyst for the carnage.
There was a lot of talk about parties going in our house, which are true. In my house were parties where people did smoke pot. And I must tell you, furthermore, that I was not at a Hollywood party where somebody didn't smoke a pot. It's not my reputation which is in stake, but it's a memory of only person who maybe loved me truly and whose name is being all over papers, and facts which will be coming out day after day will make us shame a lot of newsmen who for a selfish reason write unbearable for me horrible things about my wife.
September 26th, the murder investigation is stalled. The Tate homicides fall under two separate jurisdictions. Two separate investigations with little cooperation or coordination cause a long delay in solving the crimes. Early October, a seemingly unconnected series of events finally break the Tate-LaBianca case. California Highway Patrol officers are probing vandalism of a National Park Services truck. A tip leads them to Barker Ranch in the hills of Panamint Valley, where they hear stories about a person called Manson. Unaware of the significance of this raid, retired California Highway Patrol officer Jim Purcell prepares to arrest a man who will become one of the most dangerous criminals in American history.
In the small bathroom, there was a cabinet with a sink on top and a little cupboard door, and there was some long hair hanging out over the top of the cabinet door. And I felt it was just a wig for a moment, and then all of a sudden 4 fingers began wiggling through the hair, and this person began coming out of this tiny cupboard. And I told him what would happen if he made any sudden or strange move. And he came out, stood up, and in a very tiny little voice, he said, "Hi." And I asked him who he was, and he identified himself by the name Charles Manson, which at that time meant nothing to me or any of us.
At this time, these arrests seem to have no connection to the Tate-LaBianca murders. But the floodgates of information soon burst open. Family member and accused killer Susan Atkins starts to talk to police officers and her cellmates. First, she brags about stealing cars, then confesses to killing Sharon Tate. July 1970. Charles Manson stands trial with Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, and Leslie Van Houten. Only 17 years old, Deborah Tate decides to confront Charlie.
I arranged with proper guard changes and shifts through people talking and networking. I arranged to go in and look at Charlie. Basically, very late in the evening. There wasn't a whole lot of activity. He was brought into a little room with a banquet-sized table in between us. And we just looked at each other across that table. Not a word was said. Not one word. But I did look in those eyes, and I knew he was the one.
This confusion belongs to you. It's your confusion. I don't have any confusion. I don't have any guilt. I know what I've done, and no man can judge me. I judge me. What have you done for me?
But everyone is judging Charles Manson, weighing in with their opinion. The public, the press, even the President of the United States.
Here is a man who was guilty, directly or indirectly, of 8 murders without reason. Here is a man yet who, as far as the coverage was concerned, appeared to be rather a glamorous figure.
People were using Manson as an example of what happens when you become hippies, what happens when you take drugs. He was the dark side of something that started out as a very simple and free thing. He took something that was lovely, and he changed it into something ugly.
Before Charlie, hippies were, love, peace, and flower child, and so forth, and everyone sort of knew that they smoked pot and were safe, were not killers. After Charlie, it was, sex, drugs, and murder. And so no one trusted hippies after that. Charlie effectively killed the hippie movement.
Charles Manson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten are all convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Charles Tex Watson is also found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. All of their sentences are later commuted to life in prison when the California Supreme Court vacates all death sentences imposed before 1972. Manson and his followers have requested parole numerous times through the years and continue to be denied. Sharon's mother, Doris Tate, Gwen to her friends, spearheaded the effort to keep her daughter's killers behind bars. She founded an organization for parents of murdered children and fought for victims' rights.
We are victims of crime. We are the surviving victims of crime. And make them look at us for a change. They haven't been struck by one of these killers as yet.
She was the first one to ever attend a life or parole hearing, and that was in January of 1983. She came with me and we attended Tex Watson's parole hearing. And now victims are allowed to give victim impact statements at the time of sentencing in a murder case. And Gwen really was the catalyst for all that. She was the pioneer of the victims' rights movement.
Sharon's mother, father, and sister Patty are now dead. But her sister Deborah has picked up the mantle of the family's cause for victims' rights as a continuing tribute to Sharon and other victims of violent crimes.
In death, the greatest gift was given to the rest of us that will move on. And in her name, hopefully justice will be better served. And that is the legacy that I will take forward, the legacy that I will continue to fight for so that Sharon did not die in vain.